Hi, welcome to the State of the American Pet. My name is Erica Bishaf, and I'm one of the moderators for today. And this is my co-moderator, Paul Sippil. And this right here is our friend Aubrey from Friends of Chicago Animal Care and Control. We have several other special furry guests with us that you'll meet at the end of the show. But we've got our human guest today as well. So we'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Hi there, my name is Susan Russell.
Steve Dale.
I'm Crystal Broccardo.
Thank you.
Great. Let's get started with some of the questions that we have for you today. Perhaps each of you can elaborate on who you are and share some of your experiences. Susan, let's start with you.
Sure. I'm a longtime volunteer in the Chicago animal welfare community. I've volunteered at CACC, Safe Humane, Friends of CACC. Sorry, I'm speaking in acronyms. Chicago Animal Care and Control is what I mean by CACC. I've also volunteered at Famous Fido Rescue. I was the former executive director of Chicago Animal Care and Control, and pretty excited to start on another adventure very soon in Philly as heading up ACT Philly.
Very exciting.
Thank you.
I am a certified animal behavior consultant, and before I go on about me, both you, Susan, and Crystal, you'll talk about what you do. I mean, I'm sandwiched by heroes here, really. I mean, what you guys do, boots on the ground, is incredible. Making a difference for animals in Chicago and in some ways in the Midwest and in the nation. So I'm a certified animal behavior consultant. I write books about pets. I'm on the radio. I do television as well. I write a blog, stevedale.tv, and have been around the scene both nationally as well as in Chicago for a very long time.
Great.
Very nice. Crystal?
So my name is Crystal Broccardo, and I've been in the animal world since I was 13. I started as a volunteer at an animal shelter on the south side, and then became an employee, and then their rescue coordinator, offsite coordinator, adoption supervisor, and I have moved to a new shelter located in Mokina, which is NAWS Animal Shelter, and NAWS Humane Society, excuse me. And I also am the co-founder of Pet Gotcha Day.
Great.
Yes, and Paul, why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Oh, absolutely. So, as some of you know, not everyone, I'm the founder of Community Dining, which aims to connect people through shared meals that engage us in the means by which we fuel ourselves, stimulate substantive dialogue about important issues, such as animal welfare, of course, and strengthen our social bonds. And we do all sorts of intimate discussions in all sorts of venues all throughout the city.
And we've partnered.
Absolutely, we have.
Yes. So I'm the founder and leader of the PAC of Pet Gotcha Day. And Paul and I, we've hosted similar discussions with bigger groups of folks all around the notion of animal welfare, where we bring in both animal experts as well as everyday people that just have a passion for pets. Okay.
All right, let's continue on. I want to dig a little deeper into some of your experiences and get a feel for what has been your most meaningful moment, what has brought you into animal welfare, and if there are any particular situations that you've experienced that have occurred that have played a strong role in shaping your views.
Okay. Wow, that's a loaded bunch of questions,
Oh,
Paul.
yes.
But well, let's go. Proudest moments, I think. I love being part of the Chicago animal welfare community. I'm very proud of what it has accomplished as a community. I think the proudest moments is watching our community come together and get the city shelter up past a 90% live release rate the past year. I'm incredibly proud of the work that's being done in so many different areas. You know, we got Steve on TV helping, you know, promote the animals. We've got our amazing rescue groups. We've got the volunteers of these organizations pulling the oars. We've got the staff of our municipal shelter and everyone working together, I think, to really cultivate this life-saving ethic, if you would, in our Chicagoland community. So I'm very proud to be a part of that and to have been a part of that.
Great. Steve?
That is a tough question to answer. There's a lot there. I think
There's four, Steve. There's four questions.
Yeah, I
Are they
know.
four tough questions?
I think the proudest moment for me happens when I receive an email from someone saying, my advice saved their animal. And I get that somewhat frequently, either through the radio shows that I do, including on WGN here in Chicago, or the national radio shows I do, or my blog, or the columns I write. I think that's the proudest for me, but there are so many other things. I'm on the board of the Winn Feline Foundation. The Winn Feline Foundation supports funding for cat health studies. I just learned recently that a drug that we have supported financially, the research of that drug for these cats, FIP is feline infectious peritonitis, always thought to be fatal. So if a kitten, usually it's little kittens, that are diagnosed with this disease, that's the end of the road for the kitten. And that's the saddest thing for a veterinarian ever, to diagnose, because there's nothing that can be done. Now, thanks to studies we have funded, it seems one drug for at least some of these kittens may be the answer. You know, so how can I not be proud of being a small part of that story? Or more fun, if you're a Chicago White Sox fan, I went to the Chicago White Sox years ago and I said, you need dogs to come to the ballpark. And somehow, some way, they listened to that crazy idea. And now every minor league baseball team and most major league baseball teams have promotions that they call dog days.
I've
So
gone.
yeah,
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. So those are some of
That
the
would
things.
make me go to a ball game,
Yes.
Steve.
It did.
I think you need to bring that up to every employer too.
Right.
Well,
Take your dog to work every single day.
I'm a
New
huge
meaning to the
proponent of
dog
that.
days of August that'll give it. So
Yeah.
I
that would be
totally
great.
agree with that.
Yes.
There is a national Take Your Dog to Work Day, and I was the first spokesperson for that, actually.
Yes.
I think the Pet Sitters International were the first
Yeah.
to do it. But now there are lots of groups, including Purina, that support the notion of you taking your dog to work. And now there's paternity, right?
Yeah, paternity leave,
Yeah,
right?
yes, yeah. So I love all that.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I agree.
So
Okay.
I guess following that, my proudest moment has and probably always will be being part of helping a long-term pet find their way out of a shelter or find their way into a forever home, whether it's through a rescue and that pet's been waiting for months and months to find the perfect family, or sitting within shelter walls where unfortunately they may not have much longer to be within those shelter walls and need a way out to either a rescue or into a forever home. That's probably my proudest moment, is when I can walk those dogs out walk that dog or cat out that door and say, here's your freedom ride, buddy. Have a good day.
Yeah. You've made quite the difference. So, what do you think some of the major animal welfare issues in the city of Chicago are today?
Whoa.
Well, I
We've got a lot of loaded questions here, so
That's
be
truly a
prepared.
loaded
easy.
one. I'll
We
be
want
brief.
a meaty discussion.
Oh, well, this is your perhaps your meatiest one. Now, what I don't want
Of
to lose
course,
sight
vegetarian meaty.
vegetarian meaty always.
Yes.
But and trying to get to vegan, but not there yet. But I think some of the bigger issues, we can't lose sight whence we've come. We have come an incredibly long way as a city, and I never want to lose sight of that when talking about issues, because I wouldn't want issues to be the only thing that defines us. But I think just a subtle one that we have in our community and nationwide as well is that we don't quite yet view all dogs as individuals. And I'm just going to take this particular issue
course.
since I'm wearing the shirt. But this is something I firmly believe in, just because I've seen so many animals become sticky in the shelter just because of the way they look. And they actually look incredibly gorgeous in my humble opinion. But there is a particular body type and head type and smile type that tends to get them labeled as pit bull type dogs. And that's what we kind of call them. I like to call them Chicago's dogs. But the bottom line is, when these animals are judged before they step paw out of kennel, unfortunately they stay in kennel, irrespective of how sociable they are, or how good they are, or how wonderful they are. And I'm not saying they're all wonderful. What I'm saying is that they all need to be judged based on who they are and not what they look like. And I think we have a bit of a sticky dog issue, and we have to get through that. We have to get through the stereotypes. I think not too long back I saw an editorial in the Trib talking about some kind of pit bull peril. What do we do? I was like, what? What kind of peril is that, and where is that coming from? But the majority of animals that enter the city shelter, irrespective of whether they're a purebred American Pit Bull Terrier, which is a breed, or whether they're just a mixed breed dog, they need to be judged based on their individual characteristics and not some preconceived notion of what these dogs are like, because that way we're going to save a lot more animals in this city. These are some of our most at-risk animals, and they're unfortunately discriminated against in subtle ways as well, whether it's housing or the shelter, or just in our minds. We have our bias is confirmed every time we see these articles, or someone walks up and confidently says a pit bull is a this or a that. So that's just one of the challenges. It's more ideological, but it's one that I think we do need to confront as a city and nationwide. Steve, over to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with everything you said, as you know.
Thanks,
you know.
Steve.
Well,
Come on, yeah.
how can I not?
You
I mean,
can't.
you know,
Disagree with that.
well, I can't disagree with that because all
Can't
dogs
disagree with that either.
All dogs know. All dogs are individuals, of course, and when we look at a dog, this isn't only a Chicago problem. So you asked about Chicago.
Yes.
So I'm going to circle back to that in 1 second.
That's fine.
So everything you described is a problem all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the American Kennel Club top list of the most popular dog in America, but they look at purebred dogs, it is for like 27 years or something now, the Labrador Retriever. That's fine.
Yep.
But in fact, there are probably more dogs, far more dogs, that you would look at on the street in an animal shelter and say, that's a pit bull, just because of its certain look. We now today know, if we do genetic testing on these dogs, they are
Mutts!
Woo!
mixed
Chicago
breed dogs.
dogs.
Chicago
That's all they, yeah. Or in Philadelphia, they're Philadelphia
Yes.
dogs. In St. Louis, they're St. Louis dogs, you know. But they are now the all-American dog.
Yes.
That's really what they are.
That's what they should be called.
All American.
I like
dogs.
that.
I like
Yes.
Way to go, Steve.
Good job, man. I
Thank
might
you very
borrow
much.
that.
I know.
I might
I know.
borrow that.
Good dog.
To answer your question more directly about
Yes.
Chicago, my hope is that from here on forward, the mayor's office and elected officials who truly don't know, though they think they may, about animal welfare. Yes, I want absolutely everyone to contribute to the conversation, but not to make decisions about what they don't know about. Not to micromanage an animal care facility if they have no background in animal welfare.
Okay.
It would be like me going into a hospital, I'm not a doctor, and saying, that person there needs surgery. You know, what do I know about? I know nothing about that. And that's how it's been in Chicago for years now, and it should not be that way.
So then, what's the best way to get people more informed in terms of city officials?
Well, to listen to experts.
Okay.
Is the answer to that question. We have a
Okay.
lot of experts in this city. We have
Okay.
amazing veterinarians. We have a veterinary community. Of course, this is Chicago.
Yeah.
That outranks most in America,
Yeah.
in my own opinion, which is a bit biased because I'm from Chicago. But we
Chicago
do.
proud.
We have I am Chicago proud.
Yeah.
We have an amazing veterinary community.
Yes.
We have an amazing group with several sitting right here of animal welfare experts whose expertise could be counted on
Yes.
to answer questions. The city at one point in time, 3 times, considered breed-specific bans. So these dogs, you're calling pit bulls that we know, they're
All
just
American
individual.
dogs.
Yeah, they would have been banned from Chicago. Makes no
Yes.
sense. Today, I don't think that would ever even be considered. But back in the day, it
Yes.
was. You know.
Yes.
And the good news is they leaned on experts who know about animals to answer the question, and also input from the general public.
So then, would you say that education should be the basis for reform, or the start?
Yes, but
the city?
education for everyone.
Yes.
Education for public officials as well as people who live in Chicago.
Okay. Okay, great.
I feel one of the bigger issues in Chicago are, I fully agree with everything that they both said. It's just making sure there's a lot more community involvement. I feel that sometimes the community is not aware of how they can get involved, where they can get involved, who they're able to participate with, who they can volunteer with, where they can go, and sometimes they just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's just important to be reaching out to the community so they do know where to go, they do know where to start. Because even nowadays, even with Facebook and social media and TV and radio and all of that, some people still don't know. Some people still don't know that Chicago Animal Care and Control exists, or that Naws and Mokina exist, or Paws in Tinley Park, or all the other rescues and shelters. So I feel like it's so important to get that community involvement out there and really reach out to people within the community so they know that they can help within those walls and can help those animals and they can be a part of something bigger than themselves.
And people, just adding on to what
Absolutely.
you say, people sometimes feel, well, if I volunteer a couple of hours, it's not going to matter. If I foster an
hours.
animal,
Every-
it's not.
every
Right,
hour
it does
matters.
matter.
Let's disabuse them of that notion right now.
It
1
matters.
hour matters.
It
Every
matters.
hour matters,
yeah.
every foster home matters, every donation matters,
Every-
every
every
second
extra
matters,
matters.
and
Really,
every dollar.
opportunity to
Sometimes a dollar
socialize
makes a
the
difference.
pets.
Yeah.
But some people would come back to you and say, I can't go into a shelter. It makes me too sad.
But can I address that?
Yeah,
Speaking
please.
and Steve, I can't agree enough. And Crystal, 1 hour. That's if you can actually go into the shelter.
Yes.
15 minutes. That's 4 dogs walk that might not get out that day.
Absolutely.
That's
Yes.
4 cats that could be muckled that might not have gotten muckled
Like
that
pork
day.
chop here?
Yeah.
Like pork
Like
chop.
pork
here.
chop.
But
We did
you
a
don't have to
switcheroo.
step foot into a
Yeah.
shelter to make a huge difference in the lives of animals. There are people out there who are photographing animals. They are contributing to campaigns that are helping for medical care to pull an animal. They are networking the animals. I had the honor really of working with a bunch of cyber networkers when I was at CACC, and I got to tell you, they're out there in cyberspace getting their faces out. It's like the old Fabergé Organics commercial. You're old enough for that one. Where I told 2 friends, and I told 2 friends, and the screen
what?
and the screen goes into like 100,000 squares, and that's the effect of some of this social media boosting of their faces. The more you promote, you don't have to step foot into a shelter to promote. You don't have to step foot into a shelter to help talk about dogs in a manner that can help them get adopted. You don't have to step foot into a shelter to actually get a life saved. You can. Now, if you do, you're going to do a great service for the animals as well. But there's so many things that can be done outside of the shelter that can still save lives. Writing. Anyone like to write? Get some real fun posts going. Marketing. All of this stuff can be done by just even sharing and getting creative on Facebook.
And they're not dog pounds anymore, you know? This isn't your great-grandmother's animal
This ain't your
shelter, you know?
great-
Yeah! I mean, these places are not bad places. And the important thing to remember is the animals almost always have done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
It is not their fault that they're there.
Yeah.
So think about the animals first, and you can. So if you consider these places to be upsetting to you for one reason or the other, help make it a little better, and you can all do that.
But I will also say, the more you go,
Yeah.
because I used to do volunteer orientations and such, and people would do the orientation. I'd be all excited. We'd get all excited about going in, and I'd take them for their first tour in the open admission shelter, and they'd go through and they'd go like this, and then I'd never see them again. There are going to be some folks who can't do it, but those who do understand that maybe it's the first time it's a little hard. And oddly, they don't go home with every animal just like they thought they might. They don't. And it's a real
I
fabulous...
want to take home every animal.
But
when I
it
come
won't
home.
happen. You've already got enough. But the thing is, it's like if
Never,
you
never
are a
enough.
student,
Never enough.
it's like grandchildren, right? You can load them up with treats and love and just leave them there, and everyone benefits. So that's what you learn if you keep going back, and
And
it's
I would-
not that as
And I would even
heartbreaking.
say that there's organizations like Friends of Chicago Animal Care and Control, like where Pork Chop is
They're
from.
heroes. They're wonderful.
Heroes where you can offer to foster. Like Pork
Yeah.
Chop here is actually in a wonderful foster home. You can volunteer at adoption events. Hi.
So Friends of
Yes.
Chicago Animal Care and Control is amazing because so we were talking about some concerns we had about Chicago.
Yes.
Here's some good news.
Yeah, let's
So
talk
I mean,
about that.
and it's incredible. So these people have gotten together and said, you know, the city, and it's not only Chicago, no municipality funds animal shelters at the very top of the list. Trash collection is more important, right? So they're kind of the leftovers. So here this organization said, we are going to independently raise money and make a difference for the animals, in this case in Chicago.
You know,
That's right.
it sounds like there are a litany of volunteer opportunities, and that volunteering, even a short amount of time, makes a much bigger difference than people might admit. How else do we make people more aware of all the different volunteer opportunities that exist?
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunities through aldermen. I used to always say 50 wards are 50 opportunities. They have huge networks. Anyone who has a huge network is going to be able to help get the word out to their constituents. But I also think media is critical, and I mean positive, good media. I know that's a rarity, but positive, good media is, and Steve Dale, who's good, positive media. But anytime we talk realistically about the issues and in good positive media and talk about those opportunities, that's a really great way to get the word out more broadly. You know, it doesn't always have to be a bad news story. The good news ones actually do get attention, and I'd love to see more media on volunteering opportunities. Because as Steve was saying, it's not just, you know, you can have an opportunity to help the animals, not just through the city shelter, but obviously through all of these other organizations like Friends, all of the rescues that are out there, you know, One Tail at a Time, Paws, Safe Humane Chicago, Pet Gotcha Day. There's all of these organizations that you could just put your time into and help get the word out. And that's another way to get it out more broadly, is you be the change, you be the mouthpiece, you know, and get it out on your social networks.
So the animal welfare community is clamoring for change, at least within the city of Chicago. I'm sure in every city, but we've heard a lot recently. Hi.
Yes, I'm very cute.
So, you know, Erica,
Yeah.
so you're holding, because it won't be long that you're holding
No,
this
no,
cat.
I don't think so.
He's gonna make a getaway soon.
You're
Look at this
holding,
beauty.
you're holding, we have a professional cat wrangler
Yeah,
here.
she is.
So you're holding a black
Charlie
cat.
herds cats.
Yes.
Pardon me?
She herds cats.
Charlie Propson, who actually helped found Friends of Animal Care and Control.
Yes.
So she is a amazing
Long-time
individual.
animal
Yes.
champion, yeah.
So you were holding a black cat. So
Yes.
you asked about things that we can do. I suspect you'd agree. Getting those animals that happen to have a black coat adopted for some bizarre reason is more challenging, and that's ridiculous. I just wanted to mention that because they're all individuals, as you
They're
said.
all
They
individuals.
are. So,
See all
so
dogs?
the community is clamoring for change. How do you think that we can get the city to start hearing what the community is asking for? How can we start uniting them together in a meaningful way that we can bring change together?
Well, I think we all have an opinion on this, and I keep taking the first spot because I took the strategic spot. Crystal, you start, and we'll go this way. Because I kind of feel bad that I'm constantly getting the first go at it. You tell us your thoughts.
I still feel like the biggest thing is just education and really reaching out to the community and really getting them involved. As far as making the change, we need people up at the top, the politicians and the mayor and whoever that may end up being, and those in other higher elected official positions to really listen and to really want to be part of the change and to really want to implement the change and help us implement that change. And we need people like Steve Dale to help get the word out there, and people who have walked the walk and still walk the walk like you, that can help us bring about that change and can really get in and be part of the change. We need people who want to do, to really take action and not just speak it. We need people who really truly want to be involved and stay committed to that change.
Which you have been. And I'll bring something up that, it's not only, I agree with what you say, but it's not only the public officials. So if you have a private organization, public officials can only go so far as to what they can do.
Absolutely.
And there is one organization that has been a necessity for Chicago, the way Chicago is built. They're an open admission facility like the Chicago Animal Care and Control is open admission, being a municipal facility by law. This organization, a private organization, has been open admission forever, for many decades now.
83 years.
83 years, she says to my right. And I'm talking about the Animal Welfare League of Chicago and Chicago Ridge. And the problems there are numerous now, and the community has tried to speak up. Public officials are limited to what they can do, although they're beginning to get more and more involved for perhaps good reason. Organizations need to, I think, introspectively look at themselves and say, if the public is making their voice known about something, that loudly, that consistently, and I want you to jump in there on this because
Please just
firsthand.
listen.
Yeah, these people must, if they're all saying the same thing, why aren't you listening to the very community that has been supporting you for a very long time?
I absolutely agree. With certain organizations like Animal Welfare League, they're private, so it's hard. It's not like they're funded the same way that CACC is funded, Chicago Animal Care and Control is funded. So the public officials really don't have as much say or as much pull or as much grab in a facility like that. So it becomes a community-related facility more so. And when the community is reaching out to you and telling you and begging you to look and to realize that there's an issue and that there's a problem, people within those walls, they really need to listen. We all agree that Animal Welfare League absolutely 100% needs to exist. It needs to be there. It serves a purpose.
What is the purpose?
Animal welfare is an open intake facility that is on the south side of the city. They're in a south suburb, so they help service all the local suburbs, and they also help with the overflow from Chicago. Right. So without them, where are all those animals going to go? Animal Welfare League definitely needs to exist, but it needs to exist in the right way.
Can you explain a little bit what open intake means?
Open intake is a shelter that doesn't turn anything away. Anything can walk through that door and they readily accept it in. So that could mean that at 3 o'clock in the morning, a dog walks in with the need to be surrendered because it was found as a stray by a local police officer. They open their doors and let that dog in. They don't say no.
Okay.
And I just want to add too, I think when we're looking at trying to figure out, how do we tackle some of the issues, I think it's really important to create that narrative and that context together. And, we talk about, issues, but really, what are we as a city trying to do? If our goal is to save healthy and treatable animals, if we believe that as a city, then we need to get the right people in the room to determine what a plan for Chicago might look like. And I know, Steve, you talk about a task force, whatever this ends up looking like. You get the individuals who have a lot of knowledge about these issues, as well as those who are in communities very much affected by some of the issues, say under-resourced areas, where there's no vet to be found for miles and miles. There are people who need certain services in the city, and if we are indeed trying to create, whatever we call it, whether we call it a no-kill Chicago, whether we call it, a Pets Alive Chicago, whatever we call it. If the actual goal is to save healthy and treatable animals in our city, we must take into account the 2 open admission shelters, because they are the kind of the epicenter from which all then must flow, because those are the areas where the animals will die if they cannot get out. And we need to be very transparent about the challenge of actually trying to do this.
Okay.
So we have to pay attention to our open admission facilities, and then all of the incredible work that has been done to date in the city, and we have to identify the gaps of what still needs to be done. And one of the clear gaps is the most at-risk animals. We're still not there yet in this city, even though we've had an impressive live release rate at the city shelter. That shouldn't be the only barometer of a good change.
And at risk could be a senior pets,
senior
an all-American.
But one with minor behavioral issues or treatable behavioral issues. I think this is an area in the city where we are not as good at handling it as, say, other cities have. Not yet. I think we will become that. But that's a risk and a liability, and a lot of people look at it differently. So as a city, we need to define what is treatable behavioral, and how are we going to help the animals if we truly wish to save those that are rehabilitatable. We really need to identify facilities and organizations that will help deal with those issues, because those are the ones that are very difficult just to send out to a home and expect the regular family just to deal with those issues. We need more help in this city.
The number one reason why animals die in America is not cancer or kidney disease. It is actually behavior. So those animals land in shelters. Sometimes people tell the truth about why that dog or cat is going there. Sometimes they don't. It doesn't much matter. We know through data that is, in fact, the number one reason. So Anti-Cruelty Society in Chicago has a behavior hotline, which is wonderful. But we need more resources like that to help on both ends, to help the shelters themselves assess the animals that are there, and then to help the animals. Most are treatable. They really are. Secondly, on the other end, so they're not relinquished in the first place. And what Susan and I talk about in 2 different ways, but I think we say the same thing. I call it, we need in Chicago, especially, but all over the country, we need more safety nets for people, so they don't have to relinquish their pets in the first place.
And just to add to that, because this is why has Chicago been so successful? Well, it's not been a dictate from above. It's been because we have had so many nonprofits that have hopped in and filled in where there are gaps. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Friends of Chicago Animal Care and Control, they're out there providing the Pets for Life services out in the Lawndale area.
You got can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. So you have some areas that really don't have access to veterinary services. If people can't get their pet to the vet for a spay-neuter, guess what, folks? It might not happen. If they can't get them there for shots cuts because they don't have the transportation to do it, they have to take a day off work. I mean, we have to look at the reality of pet ownership. It is sometimes costly, and you do need the time to take care of your pet. So these types of programs, they go to folks and they say, look, do you need help with your pet? And if they accept the help, then they do hands-on help. They take the animal to go get spay-neutered and brought back. They help people get the services they need. Paws out in Inglewood is doing the same thing with its Paws for Life. You see CRISP, the Chicagoland Rescue Intervention Support Program. This blows my mind. I mean, they're sitting at the shelter for people who are coming in who don't really want to necessarily give up that animal, but they need help, whether it's behavioral, whether it's mostly medical, right, medical, and they're there to help. So what we've had is this incredibly creative and innovative, at Chicago Proud, response to a problem that has been identified in Chicago. And this is a diversionary tactic, as Steve is saying. If we can keep them out and keep them with their people and keep that bond intact, guess what, folks? Everybody benefits. Everybody benefits.
It's all about the bond. And I just want to jump on to CRISP again. So it's a coalition of organizations, rescues and shelters that have gotten together and literally, to help maybe better explain, actually camp outside Chicago Animal Care and Control.
And inside.
And
they come in too.
But they mostly say, don't enter, stop! You cannot come through, we can help you. And they do. They have saved so many animals that way.
Is there anything like this at Animal Welfare League?
I don't believe there's anything out there, but I think at the Wabash, correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal, you're far better to answer this, and I shouldn't be, but out in the Wabash facility, that's headed up by the amazing Diane Spurka, this is I believe now there are more rescues assisting, which is phenomenal, because they need the same kind of help as Chicago Animal Care and Control needs. But you respond to that, because I'm
Yes, so
I'm less than
Wabash
I
is
know.
a facility that's in a low-income area. It's at 62nd and Wabash. It provides a huge service to that community. There's nothing around there like it. They provide food support. They can provide medical support. They provide somewhere to turn to for questions, for somebody to look at, for answers. So that shelter within that area is just so important. And Diane has done a great job at really doing a reach out to the community and really being part of the community and making people feel comfortable to walk in those stores.
That's right.
Yeah.
And she has built up a community feel with all the rescues and knowing that they are welcome to come in there, and she does reach out for help. So Diane should be applauded for what she's done within the Wabash facility.
and a food pantry too.
And the food pantry.
Yes.
She
There's
provides
a food
lots of
pantry
food
up
to
there.
the
Yes.
area with people that struggle, that may not be able to afford food that week, whether it's feed themselves or feed their pet. You know, sometimes, unfortunately, that decision has to be made. And Diane has, built up that food pantry and those programs to really help that community.
Are there
And
opportunities for the public to donate food to the pantry?
yes, there are.
So
And
it's
there's
not
several
just, so it's
pet
not
food
just
pantries.
There's
corporate-
several
it's
pet
just
food
not corporate
pantries in the area, and
donors.
if you look that up online, I'm sure that you'd be able to find those pet food pantries. But the biggest thing is, like she said, within the Wabash facility, in those low-income areas, places like that have to exist, so those people have somewhere close and localized that they can get to, because they sometimes can't make the drive to CACC, or they can't make the drive to another open intake facility or to another low-income veterinary clinic. That's why Wabash serves such an important community function. Thank you for that word.
They do, but the reality is, for reasons unbeknownst to me, Animal Welfare League, this is the lack of trust that we talked about earlier.
Yes.
They are not working very well or at all now, by all accounts, to people that have spoken to me who are with these rescue organizations that say, I can't work with them. Other shelters who are willing to pool,
And there's
take
been
out.
protests too.
to
Lots
take-
of protests.
Yes.
This
so
is the Chicago Ridge, right, compared to the Wabash?
this
'Cause
is
it-
Chicago
yeah.
Ridge, but it's really
It's
one.
trickling down to Wabash.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
and
Steve.
well, you know more about this than I do, but I hear from the other side. I hear from the rescues. I hear from the other shelters saying, I don't know why. They're overfilled. They have so many dogs. I'm willing to take a few. They won't let me. They won't even talk to me. And it's unfortunate.
They just don't seem open to change. I feel like Chicago Animal Care and Control is always looking for new and inventive ways and innovative ways to really reach out to the community and get that change going. And I feel like Animal Welfare League is like stuck. They just don't want to make the change. They don't want to make the effort. They don't want to put forth that extra step. Or they don't want to put, it's almost like they don't want to put trust in the community to really rally around them and to understand that they're there to help.
They think that, by all accounts, it appears as though they seem that the community is against them because the community, in part, has protested. And, you know, some of these are individual stories, people who have had bad experiences or don't like some of the employees or don't like their leadership or former leadership. I get that. But there's a bigger issue that remains here. And grown-ups look introspectively at themselves, at their organization, and at their leadership and say, if all these people, from public officials who generally don't have a dog in the fight, I never should have said that, but who aren't involved directly in animal welfare, they have no reason to feel, and if all the constituents of their constituents or community constituents, two separate groups, people who are concerned about animals and people who just live in the area that say this isn't right, and everybody, it's a loud chorus, and they're saying the same thing. How can everyone be wrong? There's a concern there, and there's a red flag, and instead of putting up a wall, kind of break down that wall, bring people in and have conversations.
And instead of pushing the rescues away or banning them from helping the animals when they reach out to you to want to help the animals.
That's all rescues do.
They've gone as far as telling rescues that they're not allowed there anymore, that they're not allowed to help those animals, to go away. They don't want your help or their help. Open up your doors, open up your walls, open up your windows, open something, a phone line.
I'll open my arms.
But
and reach out for that help.
I think reaching out for help, I think just generally to one of the key, I think, pillars. If we look at the pillars of how many communities have actually, you know, saved the majority of their healthy and treatable animals, I think transparency is an absolute critical one, and not just for the municipal shelter. I think for all of the organizations that are taking in animals wherever they are from, taking in, you know, bringing in fosters into their organizations. I think if we are more transparent with one another and the trust starts to unfold, the thing is, if everyone's working toward the same goal, then the suspicion should not really be as high. And I think that's the conversation, again, the trust building that needs to go on in our community, because, I mean, let's face it, everyone has competing interests, that's a fact. But if we are truly as a city going to try to become a city that saves its healthy and treatable animals, all, you know, the ones that can be done, we're making that the ethic, then everyone really does need to open their books, open their doors, show people what exactly they are saving, how they are working toward that goal. I think that will go a long way towards, you know, really engendering trust among the people who need it.
How do we create a city that is more transparent, and how might we work with government officials to create more transparency? Or is that maybe the wrong question? Should we just be creating more transparency on our own? Or in other words, how much should we work with aldermen to create more transparency, or are they getting in the way?
Well, I don't want to go backwards. I want to look forwards and say that I think there's a role for every organization to put their data online. You know, and I think donors like to see that as well. I think, you know, Chicago Animal Care and Control has its data up online. I'm not sure, does Animal Welfare League?
From 2 years ago.
Okay, but like recent data online, so people can follow it and people can understand the impact of the organization. I just think it's important that we also understand the reality of it. You know what I mean? And that's a little bit harder to track. Following up on what happens. You know what I mean? That's a little bit harder to track. I don't know if you want to add to that.
So I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that they have their monetary information up online, but they don't have what Chicago Animal Care and Control does as far as transparency with numbers and euthanasia statistics. People usually have to dig for those and really look for those to find Animal Welfare League's numbers.
But this is what's important, and I have to say this because we have to take a step back, and we understand that open admission shelters are not all rainbows, unicorns, and roses. That's not the business they're in. They're in the business of the broken. Most of the animals coming through the doors are being abandoned, they've been abused, some are neglected, many are stray. I mean, they have issues. So there is going to be euthanasia at these shelters. Heck, there's euthanasia in just about every organization because sometimes it's absolutely necessary if an animal's irremediably suffering or if it is aggressive. in a manner that would be considered a danger to public safety. So
and I just want to, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So there are, in my opinion, and there are individuals that say nothing under any circumstances should be euthanized. And the reality is we don't live in that world.
No.
And
I don't think
we are benefiting the animals by doing, so an animal that's exceedingly aggressive, that animal's probably terrified and is unhappy. And if behaviorally we can't do anything with that animal's adopted into a home, we're talking about a danger to the community.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could be avoided by paying attention in the first place enough so that animal is euthanized. That makes space for another animal who could be a wonderful pet.
But I think it's really important that we have an honest conversation about saving healthy and treatable animals, and that does require transparency of data, because at all shelters and especially open admission shelters, you are going to have a number for died in care. Why? Because animals can die in care. You want to understand why, and you want to report it. Euthanasia stats, you want to understand how many animals were brought in requested to be euthanized by their owner, as well as those that were euthanized in shelter for either health, behavior, or even space. These are the kinds of numbers that shouldn't make an open admission shelter a target of criticism. They should be something that the community works toward making, improving and continually improving. But that you can't be afraid to put out your data. That's got to be the thing. We have to create and cultivate that kind of culture of transparency and of life-saving. And if we're all working toward that goal, then those numbers are critical for helping us steer the boat.
And the transparency links back to the education. If you're not transparent with the public, then you can't educate them on what the real issues are.
That's right.
If they don't understand that an open intake shelter means that animals unfortunately die, then they may not understand the urgency of which we need them to be involved and to volunteer and to foster.
You're making an incredibly good point there. Yes.
Transparency is such an important key to education for the community that without it, change can't be made.
Yep. No, you are, and the sense of urgency, Crystal. I got to comment on that, because that's something that's always kind of just killed me inside in some respects, because it's almost as though everyone should know that the minute an animal enters an open admission shelter, the urgency has attached. And the urgency attaches. We shouldn't have to wait till that animal's on a youth list, quite frankly. We should all know as a community that the open admission shelter is the place where it's going to fill up. And if they're going to try to get them out, it's going to be at capacity quite frequently, because you want to hang on to them until they can get the second chance. But the bottom line is, a sense of urgency doesn't seem to come about half the time until animals are on a youth list. And we have to get away from that. I don't know the answer to this one. This is the trickiest question I think there is, because we don't have Sarah McLachlan going doobie-doobie-doo in the background all the time and kind of, oh, I got to do something, it's Sarah. But that's not what's happening.
Maybe we need a soundtrack.
We need a soundtrack, but we shouldn't have to have a soundtrack. We should know intuitively that the most at-risk animals in our community are those that are going into the open admission shelters, whether it's AWL or whether it's CACC. And that's not the fault of CACC or AWL. That's a necessary function in our community. Yeah. So if that is the case, the urgency should attach, because the minute an animal goes through the door, if it doesn't get out that day, and some do, okay? Some are super tiny, cute, whatever, boom, out the door that day. But if they're going to be there for any length of time, they have the risk of getting sick. If they weren't behaviorally distressed when they came in, they sure will be once they get into noisy kennels. That can change things for an animal. And they can turn. And I'm not saying that happens to all animals. That does not happen to all animals, but it is indeed a risk to those that go in there. A kitty cat that goes in there, my Lord. Any of us who are owned by cats know what happens when they go into a metal box.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even recognize my animals.
Well, and it's also the ability, unfortunately, infectious disease is rampant. So with their immune system down just a bit, this is even more of a problem, I would argue, for cats than it is for dogs.
But when we had, canine influenza virus at the shelter, which I'm glad has gone, well, as far as we know. But that speaking of necessity as the mother of inventor, that's when CRISP really started up, and for that reason, because the minute an animal would come through the door, you could just, because of the am I saying this right? The immunological naivety of every dog system in Chicago at that
Right.
time. If a dog came in the shelter, that challenge would be introduced almost immediately, and they would get it. It was almost a guarantee. And CRISP got themselves set up because the rescues were fed up paying really big bills for pneumonia, those comorbidities that crop up when CIV infiltrates the system. You get, a weakened immune system. Anything else can kind of come on and opportunistically take up shop, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So pneumonia, which is terribly, and I'm not saying dogs don't still get that, or dogs, cats get other things as well, but the bottom line is, we want to try our best not to have animals come into the shelter, find solutions before that, because the urgency will attach the minute they cross the threshold, and we shouldn't have to wait for youthless. And I'm not saying that people are deliberately waiting. That's not what's happening. It's just we have to as a community, I think, always be thinking about the urgency there. And it's always going to be there. There's never going to be a time when an animal enters an open admission shelter when they're not urgent.
Yes.
And what Susan's talking about is human nature, I think. You see those Facebook posts, you have 3 hours and that is all. The clock is ticking, and people respond to
They
that.
respond to that.
But all the animals, what you're saying is absolutely, of course, true. And all of the animals, two points I want to make. One is that at least in Chicago, the canine influenza virus is likely to be endemic, which means it lives here. So don't consider yourself safe if your dog is at all social in any way, shape, or form with other dogs. Secondly, is something you said, Paul. I don't want to give the impression that Chicago aldermen are in any way bad guys. In fact, most have done a lot to help Chicago Animal Care and Control, and they themselves have pets, so they understand. Also, one alderman in particular, I want to call out.
Alderman Sposato?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep, he's being honored at Big Night, and for good reason.
Yes.
That's the benefit for Friends of Chicago Animal Care and Control. He has done so much personally.
Well, I just want to say that if we had that kind of support for the city shelter, emanating from the other 49 wards, and there are indeed other aldermen out there as well who've been very supportive. But I got to tell you, the commitment, the level of commitment that Alderman Sposato has shown to the animals at Chicago Animal Care and Control has been exceptional. Yeah. And I think when the aldermen decided they wanted to make Chicago 2018 Year of the Shelter Pet, I think Alderman Sposato took that very seriously. Yeah. And he did everything from blanket drives to showing up at the shelter to do a PSA for lost pets. These are the kinds of things, if you want to educate the public, you can do. Why? Because you have a public. Yeah. You are a public figure.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in the education and starting young. I'd love to see programs in our schools to get the kids involved in understanding early on, so then they can carry that into adulthood. Just switching gears a little bit, you've all mentioned different instances of euthanasia. It happens sometimes, it's medically necessary, sometimes it happens due to space. And there's been a lot of talk in our city about Chicago becoming a no-kill community, or no-kill Chicago. What does that mean?
Well, I want to go back, and that again, no-kill does not mean never euthanizing an animal. Yeah. No-kill is an aspiration, and it's exactly what I've been saying. Saving the healthy and treatable animals. Now, treatable, of course, is a relative term, and the community has to determine what is going to be medically, that's going to be a resource question, and behaviorally treatable.
But that's not up to one public official.
No, that's up to a community. That's up to a community to determine, because let me tell you, different communities have different levels of risk tolerance, and that has to be determined, okay? A dog
and resources that can
and
treat
resources
animals.
To actually do it, because if you get a dog that has parvo, now it used to be that was untreatable within the context of the open admission shelter, because if a parvo dog came in that shelter and spread parvo to the herd, or distemper dog, or what have you, then that would be a huge risk that the shelter could not take. So that dog would be immediately euthanized. Now, parvo is technically treatable because we have rescues like CRISP, the consortium of rescues that say, you got a parvo pup coming in, call us. Boom, they're there. The pup goes out, no risk to the herd, and the animal sometimes lives. Most of the time they are living. So what we see is an evolution in what becomes healthy and treatable. Okay. But we have to understand, a no-kill city, like if you look at Austin, you look at any of these cities that actually have that official title, it's not that no animals aren't ever euthanize. That's ridiculous. We know that we end suffering by euthanasia, a dog that is irremediably suffering. I'll tell you right now, I'll give you a good example. Dear little animal comes into animal care and control. I literally lifted him in with Jenny Schluter, my assistant, coming in, and his intestines were all outside of his body. He'd been hit by a car. This apparently can happen. I've never seen anything like it. We go to the back. We consult with the vet. The vet says, you know, half of it's necrotic. They're dead. This animal is not going to survive. And the dear little soul was sent in. So the euthanasia was not the enemy there for that animal. It's not the enemy for a lot of animals that are suffering. Behavioral cases are much harder. And I'll tell you, when I've been with some of the animals when they've been put down for that, and that is the hardest for anyone, because we know, say Steve's a wonderful puppy dog and he's bonded with me, but he hates everyone else. We know that he has the ability to bond, but we also know that he might be a risk to other people in society. And that's a really hard call for any shelter to make, for any individual to make, and that's the one that gets the most criticism. And we have to be careful about that, because we don't want to encourage people to keep animals that could be a very severe risk to other people or other pets. I mean, that's not smart. So no kill is a concept that is not, unfortunately, it doesn't quite mean what it says, and that's why people get confused by that terminology. And I talk about it, not in that term. I always talk about saving healthy and treatable animals, because very few people disagree that as a society, we shouldn't be killing animals for space that are healthy and treatable. Yeah. Most people would not disagree with that statement.
I can't be as eloquent as you
Yes,
have been.
you're probably more so, sir.
I don't think so. You know, you said it so well, and when the term no kill first popped up, the only issue I had with it, and I still do, it implies that open admission facilities are, if those are no kill, that means they're kill. Yeah. And they're actually, at that time, no kill facilities that took advantage of that and marketed intentionally. We don't kill, but the guys across town do, and they would say so. I don't think that's helpful for the community. Of course, everyone, certainly the three of us, and I think most people in the general public, they don't want to see healthy, treatable animals die. Yeah. Nobody does. Even people who have never had a pet, ever. Right. They don't want to see that either. The community doesn't want to see that, but unfortunately, these terms have become, in some cases, even more divisive over the years. So I also agree, I just don't like the term, because it implies to some that, oh, then we're killing animals. That's not right either. Yeah. And it's not the right way to think about it.
But I do feel like over the past, I don't know, a little while, I think people are shifting towards understanding the term in a community way, which is beneficial. You know what I mean? If we can understand it to mean healthy and treatable pets, if we can connote it to mean that, and it's a community ethic,
absolutely,
and an aspiration.
No,
to me, it has a power. We've seen the power to create brand value in Austin, and we've seen, and I don't mean to sound so superficial, but brand value's got a good, you know, if you can get people to support it because it also benefits a city in other ways, not just the one that we really super care about, which is keeping these sentient beings alive and getting them good prospects, but also in a way that benefits businesses, that creates opportunities for people, work opportunities, what have you. This then becomes something that's far bigger and more powerful. Yeah. So you know, to the effect, I think we're starting to see more of an understanding of what that can be here. Okay. Because I think people are striving toward it. Crystal, we're talking away, and you're not. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't get Steve and I in a room.
We have about 1 minute left for discussion. I know.
Give it to Crystal.
Time flies. Well, since we're talking about defining terms, I just want to address TNR, trap, neuter, release. It's a term that people hear about.
We need to do it.
Okay.
And we need to do it right.
You've got maybe 2 minutes. We can stretch this. Just so we can help educate the public, what is that? What does that mean?
So it's taking cats that are outdoors. Anyway, you want to talk about it?
Go right ahead. You guys are the experts on this. I will actually admit that I am not.
Okay, so it's taking cats that are outside anyway. Now we call them community cats.
And, this is definitely an inside cat.
Outside anyway. So over the years, all sorts of institutions have said, okay, what are we going to do about these cats? Individuals have tried to poison them. They've tried to shoot them. They've tried to bring them into animal care and control facilities and adopt these cats out that are not socialized. None of this has worked over decades and decades. More than that, hundreds and hundreds of years, these cats have associated with people. They are out there. We think we have as many to twice as many unowned cats in America as we do have owned cats. So what do you do about them? So the best solution so far that we've come up with is hard. Yes, I can get to that. We've lost that in Chicago, but other communities are doing that. But what we can do is we could trap them. We can then bring them in to be spayed, neutered, and vaccinate them. That's hugely important for public health. Vaccinate them for rabies, and in some cases, like our county, Cook County, microchip them as well. Then release them back out, let them live out their lives, and also cat caretakers help to feed those cats, take care of the cats, identify cats that are clearly ill, and then those cats are taken in for veterinary care. It is the best thing we can do for cats. Or that cat. No kidding. I know. Now, I'm jealous. I know.
So we're out of time.
What?
We are out of time. I want to thank
So
you
we need
so
to do
much.
better at TNR in Chicago.
Okay.
But I gotta say,
And it should be
Yes.
TNRV. Trap, neuter, return, vaccinate.
Vaccinate,
yeah.
of course.
Oh my goodness. Now this delicious little creature is available for adoption, so.
Yes. So we've got several friends from Friends of Chicago Animal Care and Control. They are the nonprofit arm of Chicago Animal Care and Control. They volunteer their time with adoption events, with fostering, and they foster both cats and dogs. They are equal opportunity. And they have monthly adoption events. They have big events like their big nights. And you can find out more information about Friends of Chicago Animal Care and Control on their website, which is fcacc.org. We want to thank Friends for bringing us these beautiful kitties. And we want to thank you all for participating today.
Thank you. Great to have you.
Thank you.
And you get a kitty.
That's right.
Oh,
Thank you so much.